Good evening and welcome along to NUFC Matters. Tonight's special guest is Jed Grebby from Show Racism, The Red Card, and another fellow Toon fan. How are you, Jed?
I'm not bad, Steve. How are you?
Yeah, good. Good to see you, mate. I hope you're coping through lockdown like everybody else. It's been an absolute nightmare. I know we seem to be coming to some kind of release, but it's still not life as we knew it.
No, I've finally got a haircut, which is good, but I could do with getting out of this bedroom.
Yeah, it's awful, mate. And luckily I haven't had to worry about the haircut, but the beard's getting a bit out of control as people keep reminding us. But anyway, let's just go back in time a little bit. And as I say, I wanted to get you on to talk about Show Racism, The Red Card. It's a fantastic organisation and something which people in the North East are immensely proud of, because we've got a wonderful cosmopolitan up here, which essentially is something that is a big attraction for the area. But it wasn't always like that. And I remember going to Newcastle United games. My first games were in the mid-'80s, and I remember queuing up at the Gallagher end, going in at 1:30, as you used to do, believe it or not, kids. That's what we used to do. And I remember being greeted by skinheads wearing denim and Dr. Martin boots and skinheads, and they were selling, all kinds of, racist magazines. And, that was par for the course. As a young 11, 12-year-old going into the match, I didn't really understand it, didn't know what it was, but that's what it was like back then, Jed.
Absolutely. And even before we had Show Racism, The Red Card, we had a campaign then, Geordies Are Black and White. And one of the highlights of that campaign was a player called Kevin Keegan coming out. And for the first time I can remember, Jack Charlton did a bit of it, to be fair to him, when he was manager, but Kevin was absolutely superb. He grabbed a hold of them. It was a National Front leaflet. The National Front was selling their newspaper, the flag outside the Gallagher end. And one of them had given Keegan a leaflet, and it was, "Do you want this man to have your job?" And it was a monkey on the front. And Keegan made a point of saying, "I don't want these people at my club. They're not welcome at my club." And it was amazing to have somebody like that. Even before we had Show Racism, The Red Card, Keegan back in Geordies Are Black and White was an inspiration. Yeah,
top man. And Kevin, of course, somebody who gets the area, gets the club, and it comes as no surprise to hear that. And I mean, getting through the turnstiles and getting onto the terraces, it didn't stop there, because of course, we were plagued with racist chants within the ground. I remember one game in particular where there was a player coming on, I think it was for Birmingham City, if I remember rightly, and people were throwing bananas at him, and there was monkey chants being made. I mean, it was horrendous, wasn't it? That kind of atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean, the worst one I remember was Sunderland, and because obviously it had the vitriol of the derby, but with the tinge of Sunderland had two black players, Gary Bennett and Howard Gale, and if memory serves me right, which it normally doesn't, but they both got sent off. And I know both lads now, Gary and Howard, both work for Show Racism, The Red Card, and the abuse they got that day was unbelievable. I think it was 40,000 in the ground, and probably half of the people were either laughing or going along with it or doing monkey chants. So bananas on the pitch. It was horrendous. And at that stage, I think that was one of the turning points, because they both got sent off. They were both strong characters, Gary and Howard, and they wanted to do something about it. And I think the generation of players that came after them, the Andy Coles and that, were on the shoulders of those guys, fighting racism with our campaign, Show Racism, The Red Card.
Yeah. You were active member of Youth Against Racism in Europe to start with, though, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. We were involved in doing anti-racist work, and we produced magazines in the North East, and it was one of those magazines back in '94 we did it, that we sent to Shaka in '95 that started the campaign off. He got it, sent a 50 quid check back saying he wanted to get more involved, and so without that magazine, I don't think we would have had, without Youth Against Racism in the magazine that we did in the North East, I don't think we would have had Show Racism, The Red Card, because at that stage we hadn't come up with the idea, because we hadn't really got players who wanted to become actively involved. And that was the key thing. Once Shaka got involved, he brought John Beresford with him. to the first event at Westgate Community College, which opened the West End in Newcastle. We knew we had something amazing straight away. The impact that we made in that event, and then the subsequent TV coverage was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, Shaka Hislop, of course, was one of our goalkeepers in the entertainers team for those younger viewers. And it was the quote I think I saw. It might have been on the website, it might have been on Wikipedia, where he basically just told this little story. He was putting petrol in his car, I think, at a garage, and these kids started shouting racist abuse at him. And then one of the lads who was amongst the crowd suddenly realised that it was Shaka Hislop, that it was Newcastle United's goalkeeper, and he told his friends that. And then suddenly these young lads who'd been shouting racist abuse at Shaka came over to Shaka at the garage and were asking him for his autograph, and he said that really, really hurt him.
That was one of the first instances he talked about. It was actually the Esso station, which I think is still there at St James's Park. Last time I looked, it was still there. Last time I went to a football match. And the backstory of that was his wife, Desha, was in the car, still his wife, pregnant with her first daughter. It was now, obviously, was born a Geordie. And he was worried for his own safety. And Desha was worried as well, because it was 4 of them, teenage lads, and they'd given them racist abuse from across the road. And so when they came over, Shaka made sure that, first of all, he wasn't going to give any autographs out, but also he made sure they knew that he wasn't going to be supporting them in any way. So, but after that, we were lucky enough to get him involved. And as I say, second event, Les Ferdinand came down with Shaka. Keegan was the manager. We had access that year to 11 players, and some of the greatest players I've ever seen on the first film. Tino Asprilla, David Ginola. I could name them all, but it might take a bit too much time. But what a way to start a campaign. Newcastle top of the league. Should have won the league, as every Newcastle fan knows. And having the manager and then players backing us was incredible.
Of course, that was in like the mid-90s. You're talking like the 95, 96 season, of course, when Newcastle, nearly won the league. The welcome you would have got from the community, was it mixed? I mean, was there still a lot of racism? Because obviously we started the interview talking about the mid-80s when it was rife. Had things calmed down a little bit? I mean, my memory's obviously, not going to really recall that, but I don't recall a lot of racism within the ground 10 years later in the 90s.
You're absolutely right. So the Show Us Right card actually started in 96, January 96. But a lot of the work had been done before that by fans groups across the UK and fighting racism. Geordies Are Black and White, I've mentioned. But Millwall Fans Against Racism, Leeds United Fans Against Racism. And the players themselves. So, Andy Cole was a key player for us here in the North East because of he became the best player at that stage that we had. But a lot of the work of fighting racism had already been started before Show Us Right card started, and I think things had got from the 70s when I started throughout the 80s. By the early 90s, things were getting better, and they were getting better because fans were challenging it. Footballers were challenging it, not just black footballers, but white ones as well. And the union, the PFA, were instrumental in it as well. So I think there'd been a sea change. And in society as well, you'd had the murder of Stephen Lawrence, and people wanted, like today, like the Black Lives Matter movement today, people wanted to see change. And we were lucky at Show Us Right card to be involved in that right from the word go.
Was there a lot of animosity from people? Did you come up against some racisms in the system? You know what I mean? Because we still hear a lot about it on the news. I don't want to get into it. The different politics. Different political parties. We have accusations of racism on one side, Semitism on the other side. Did that affect you at all? Did you come up against a few brick walls in the early days?
I mean, overwhelmingly. And I would massive support from the day one. I mean, as I say, it helped where we started and who we started with. But then we were lucky enough that when we went to Middlesbrough, Viv Anderson was the assistant manager. Brian Robson wanted to get involved. Curtis Fleming. So we started with those 3 players who are still involved in the campaign today. Legends, certainly Viv and Brian, incredible England players. Curtis, a fantastic ambassador for sure. It's my card, an Irish international. And then we went to Sunderland. Gary Bennett, David Kelly moved to Sunderland then. He's still a Geordie at heart, of course, but he'd moved to Sunderland. He got involved in the campaign in Sunderland with Gary, and we knew straight away the support we were going to get was massive. And Peter Reid, instrumental. I always remember Peter Reid calling the BNP as the NF had turned, National Front had turned into the British Nationalist Party, saying he didn't want that scum of the earth at Roker Park. I remember that interview vividly, and him and Niall Quinn getting involved. So we're very, very lucky in how we started and the support we got, and it was across the board. I mean, we're lucky enough now to have across the pot support in the UK Parliament and in the Welsh Assembly and the Scottish Government as well. And we would call out racist political parties. Yeah. Sorry, mate, my mobile's gone off.
Okay.
Is this live, guys? Stop it.
I can stop it, yeah, don't worry.
Yeah.
You do a lot of work with schools, Jed. What do you do when you go into the schools? What's the average presentation about, and what do you do with the kids?
Well, it's changed very much over the years, Steve. The first ever events, the ones I mentioned already, were assemblies with Shaka, Les Ferdinand and John Beresford, packed out to the rafters. We showed them a film that we'd done here in the Northeast, with 17 players on in total and managers, and then, which is about 25 minutes long, and then we'd talk to them about the issue of racism and do a Q&A. But things have moved on. I mean, we're now nearly 25 years later. We've got an education team here in the Northeast. We've got offices in Glasgow, offices in Wales, in Cardiff, offices in Southend-on-Sea. And those education teams, in schools every day, or they were before lockdown. I mean, we're doing a lot and preparing now to do a lot online. But the average day would really depend on what the school want. We've got a very adaptable team. And they can talk about whatever the issues are in that particular school. We've had the rise of Islamophobia, anti-Muslim hatred since 9/11 and 7/7, and anti-immigration sentiment as well. So things that racism's changed quite a lot over the last 25 years, and we've got a team who are very adaptable. And wherever we go, if it's an adult audience, we do teacher training, or primary school or secondary school, our education workers were able to adapt to what the school want, or indeed what the trade union want, or what the college want, or whatever organisation we're currently working with is.
I mean, from those humble days that you started off back in '95, and Shaka wanting to make the donation and then backing it and then getting the entertainers involved, the organisation has grown immensely, hasn't it? I mean, I think it was originally started in Whitley Bay, if I'm right, and then you have offices now, in Scotland, in Wales, and now abroad. I think in Ireland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark. I think the list goes on. It's did you ever expect it to build like the proverbial snowball at the top of the mountain and going down and gathering all the snow?
To be honest, when the first impact we had, we knew it was going to be massive. I mean, when Les Ferdinand and Shaka came in and the TV cameras came with them, the impact was massive. So, yes, actually, one of the mistakes we made was in '97, we actually did the film in 7 languages and went all over Europe. And I think that probably wasn't the right thing to do at that stage, because really we were too small. And you've got to build a base, and that's what currently, that's what we've done over the last 25 years. But if we'd done that after 15 years, I think we could have, as we have done, build strong organisations elsewhere. But we made a few mistakes. It was the year against racism, '97, and went all over Europe. But overwhelmingly, the organisation has been a big success story.
Yeah, I mean, a huge success story. There's no doubt about that. Going out into the community is such a big thing, and I know you work heavily though with the football club, Newcastle United in particular. I'm obviously going to ask about that because we're both Newcastle fans. How supportive have the club been moving forward? I mean,
the club have been one of the backbones of what we do, not just Newcastle United, but the community departments, throughout the country, and not just the Premier League. We're able to use the role model status of players in the Welsh leagues, for example, where young people will look up to those sporting role models. And you know, overwhelmingly, of course, the Premier League is a bit more exciting for young people, but we are in the region. We've worked with Blyth Spartans, we've worked with Gateshead, we work with the rugby clubs, the ice hockey clubs, and we've always had other sporting role models on our panel. And indeed, you know, we've used actors over the many years from Biker Grove. That's how Anton Deck got involved in the campaign. We've had actresses and actors, you know, from a lot of the local TV shows that have gone on. The gag I say is we're more Hollyoaks than Hollywood, but if anybody from Hollywood's listening, then we're more than happy. We've had Vinnie Jones involved at one stage, but yeah, we'll take any role models to help educate young people against race. So.
I mean, you have a Hall of Fame. You know, I mean, some great names on there, and obviously a lot of former North East footballers. You got Shola Ramiobi on there. You got John Anderson, Kevin Ball, John Barnes, Warren Barton. You know, the list endless. Gary Bennett's on there. John Beresford, of course, who you've already mentioned. You know, what is the Hall of Fame?
So we decided on our 10th anniversary to you know, have an event to celebrate the contribution, because these players, not just football players, but as I mentioned, other role models, have given that time free of charge. That's, you know, we're not paying fees for these people. You know, we certainly couldn't afford it in the early days, and we wouldn't want to now, because we want the heart and soul to be into fighting racism. And we want to just say thank you, and that's where the Hall of Fame came from. The first one, we're lucky enough, Gordon Brown was Prime Minister. We did it in 10 Downing Street. Had an incredible turnout of managers and players from throughout England, Scotland and Wales. And, you know, every few years now, every 5 years, we're due one next year now for our 25th anniversary. We'll have a Hall of Fame, and we'll try to have somewhere prestigious to hold it. But it's about saying thank you to, I think we've got about 100 players in it now, and various other role models. It's about saying thank you to those players who and actors who've given that time free of charge. We're very keen, and I keep saying this in various interviews, to hook up with Lewis Hamilton. We're hearing good things about and wanting to fight racism. Well, Lewis, if you're listening to this, then certainly get involved, because we're the organisation to do that through. Yeah,
I mean, the last few months have obviously been, you know, unreal. It has to be said. It's like something out of a science fiction novel, and you know, a lot of premonitions from books that we probably all did on our English exam, 1984, etc. All feel as if it's coming true. It is quite a bizarre situation, but in the middle of that, we also had the murder of George Floyd in America, which of course was headline news, not in America, but all around the world, because of the way that the man died. Obviously, the police officers had a hold of him, but one of those police officers chose to place his knee on the neck of George Floyd, which ultimately saw him die. And from our perspective, or any human's perspective, that was shocking to see. And obviously the phrase was, that was coined was, "I can't breathe." And obviously I've looked on your website, which is great and really informative. And anyone who wants to pop on there should have a look at theredcard.org. The "We Can't Breathe" original film that you've got on there is, it's shocking. But has this really, over lockdown, I suppose, pushed racism to, the front of the agenda for people?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, at the beginning of lockdown, we finished off a film on the NHS, because the NHS had commissioned us to do a film on racism in the NHS. And of course, beginning of lockdown, NHS workers were, putting their lives, as they still are, on the line, along with other key workers. So we thought that film was an important one to do, and it was great to do it during lockdown. But then the murder of George Floyd has been an absolute sea change for our organisation. We've been, overwhelmed with support of people raising funding for us, doing marathons, shaving off their beards, selling their handbags. A Gucci handbag, over 1,000 people bid £10 for it. And, we've had incredible support. Unfortunately, it took the death of George Floyd for that to happen. And the film we have done on Black Lives Matter is due out on Friday, tomorrow, at 12 o'clock. So that'll go live at 12 tomorrow. It's a really powerful film. I urge everybody listening to this podcast to, to go and have a look at that film. It'll be on our YouTube at 12 o'clock on Friday the 24th of July, obviously.
Has it surprised you, the public outcry and the uprising? Because, I would imagine sometimes you feel as if, it's you against the world sometimes. But this has been a major turning point, I feel, and watching the news reports of thousands of people marching through various city centres, and we've seen monuments, of course, taken down by people. Not that we endorse that, but we understand why, because a lot of these statues are outdated, and they represent an old generation of people who used to trade in slaves. So has it surprised you, the public reaction?
Yeah, it definitely has surprised me, but overwhelmingly, I still think people are in this country and throughout the world are mainly anti-racist, and we would say, well, we've always been in the majority, even in those dark days of St James's Park that I mentioned in the 80s. It was a quieter majority. Now I think we're much more vocal, and I think the great thing about the Black Lives Matter movement is the young people coming to the fore. I mean, the demonstrations have been overwhelmingly black and white. You don't fight racism with just black people fighting it. You need black and white people together, and they've also been very, very young in terms of their composition. I mean, if you have a look at our Twitter account, Curtis Fleming has got a great story of his daughters dragging him on the demo because he was worried. I mean, I think a lot of I'm in my 50s. Curtis is 50. A lot of people in that age group are worried about obviously getting the virus. So Curtis didn't want to go on the demo, but his daughters said, "You're coming with her." And they made a stand, and the likes of Gary Bennett have been on the Sunderland demo as well. So it is really important, though, that this younger generation get involved. And we've got two great young activists involved in the North East who are in this new film, Black Lives Matter. They'll come out tomorrow. So I urge people, as I said, to have a look at that. And yeah, I'm being pleasantly surprised, but it's been an amazing amount of support. And I think, crucially, like the murder of Stephen Lawrence, it's got to be, the murder of George Floyd has to lead to a much more positive change. And we saw a change in the law when Stephen Lawrence was murdered to make racism illegal. And now we need to see a big change internationally around the murder of George Floyd.
Back in the day when you first started out, of course, it was a publication, a magazine, but the internet's obviously grown, and now we have social media. Has that been a big help, or has it been a hindrance in a way as well, social media? Because I find this as somebody who just comments on Newcastle United and talks about Newcastle United on a regular basis. Trolls, obviously are out there, and there's so many people making up hundreds of accounts and literally just trying to make your life hell. So yeah, does it help, or does it hinder, or does it do a bit of both?
It definitely does a bit of both. People will say things online and in social media that would never say to your face, and I think that my advice to anybody who's a keyboard warrior is, if you're not going to say it to somebody's face, then don't say it online. But also, it's definitely led to a rise of racism, and what Shurison Mercado would say is the social media companies, the Zoom, but in particular Facebook and Twitter and organisations like that are making billions, not millions, but billions, and they now need to put some funding into anti-racist education, because they're called social media companies, but actually they don't act very sociable. And if their medium is being used to spread racism, and this is organised stuff, this is from the far right as well. We know this 12-year-old kid who sent the stuff to Wilfred Zaha the other week. If you looked at it, that was far right stuff, the Ku Klux Klan. And then, the imagery he got, he hadn't done that himself. He got that from a far right website. And we know that can lead to young people down the path of not only sending stuff out, but ultimately, carrying out attacks. So I think the social media companies have to play a much bigger role. But of course, the other side of things is we can get an anti-racist message across via social media as well. So it can be used as a positive, but certainly I think the companies need to have more social responsibility.
I think a lot of education, I mean, it starts at home, doesn't it? If you have, a parent who's racist or parents who are racist, then, you're always going to be up against it because that's the way you're brought up. But I suppose what you're doing in schools, that is going to, at least it'll help. It'll try and instill the correct morals and the way to behave, at school.
Absolutely. And, we, Insurance Medical do adult education, but ultimately, when young people are forming their ideas, in primary school in particular, last year at primary school is where we do most of our work. Of the 50,000 young people we work with every year, probably 80% of them are on that last year, because that's when you can, you have an impact on their ideas. But I'm not saying adults don't change their opinions. I would hope anybody can always look to better themselves, to educate themselves, to look at what, why they think what they do. But ultimately, Insurance Medical, believe that the primary school years are when we can have the biggest impact.
Yeah, I mean, it's key, really. And as I say, for me, that's why I wanted to get you on, just to try and get, just to get the word out there and promote what you're doing. Just before I get on to a couple of Newcastle topics with you, how can people get involved? And we'll post the link up to the website on the channel and on the video. So how can people actually get involved? And what are you looking for from people over the next few months?
Well, there's numerous ways to get involved in Insurance Medical via the website. So go on the website. We've got if you work in schools, there's a 6-hour course there for you, where you can log on and do a 6-hour course with a certificate at the end, produced by our education workers. It's a fabulous tool, not just for teachers, but for teaching assistants, for head teachers, in fact, for anybody working in a school. And equally, we are always looking for volunteers at Insurance Medical, so contact us and see what ways you can help. As I say, at the moment, we've got people running marathons for us. We've got people going into schools and so certainly they were going into schools to help before the lockdown. But contact us, email us, and get involved in any way you think you can to help fight racism.
And even if you feel you haven't got time to do anything, there's a nice shop on there. You want to get yourself a red T-shirt, or get yourself the education pack, or get yourself, something else on there, the DVDs, magazines, wearables, whatever, publications. Ideal. Just get yourself onto the shop side of things. Now, when I have guests on, Jed, we, especially Newcastle fans, always want to know a little bit about their support and history. So, can you remember your first game, Jed?
I can't, because I was far too young to have gone. So I was born in my dad. I remember being terrified. Yeah. I think I was in the popular end. I got passed over people's heads and things. I would guess I was 4 or 5. I had my first season ticket with my granddad when the East Stand opened in 1972 when I was 10, and that's when I fell in love with football. I took my kids when they were too young as well. I remember my son once going to a reserve game, because I couldn't get him into the proper games, and counting all the chairs in the stand, running up and down counting the chairs. You think maybe it's too early. I think he's about 5 as well. So I fell in love with the Leeds then, to be honest. I always remember going, and I'm still to this day. I love the football, but ultimately football for me is the atmosphere. It's the fans, and that's why at the moment I'm really not interested in watching these games behind closed doors. I watched a away win at Bournemouth, and that was good because it was good football. But I am football without fans to me is absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. It's I think they just wanted to finish the season really just so Liverpool can win the league. It would have been drastically unfair on Liverpool to do everything that they had done to miss out because of this. So I think that's why they decided to finish it.
I think a bit of money might have come into it as well. I think that's some TV contracts.
I think so. Favorite player, Jed, of your supporting life?
Originally Malcolm MacDonald, obviously Shearer. But in terms of I've always liked the skill players. So Tino, probably top of the pops for me. I mean, him and Ginola. I mean that team, to be honest, but him and Ginola on that team. And it'd be unfair not to say Les Ferdinand as well, because Les was yeah, still is. He's still involved in the campaign. So Les, what a centre forward.
And your best
Not
match?
many defenders there.
No, definitely not. Best match that you've been to as a supporter?
Used to go away with my granddad, and when we did the 74, when we went to Wembley, I went away to the Nottingham Forest game. We had to play them because of the pitch invasion. We had to play them again, and we went to Everton to play them, and they had, that was the unforgettable beating them, because they had Duncan McKenzie, who was an incredible player. They were a good Nottingham Forest side, and then going to Wembley, it broke me heart, 74. But yeah, you got to get used to that as a Newcastle fan, as we all know. But yeah, that game, I always remember it. Just the atmosphere of a night game when you're that young, and how big it was, and all the coaches, and yeah, and we won, of course. It always helps if you win. I loved the Wembley trips as well in the 90s. They were, the Barcode Army, everybody wearing the black and white shirts. Great days, Kevin Miles booked the cricket club in Wembley, stroke of genius by Mr. Miles, and had a great drink beforehand, and even afterwards, we came back together, and everybody was, we'd lost twice in a row, but everybody was, picked themselves up with what we are, which is the best supporters in the world.
Brilliant. Best goal you've seen?
Mark McDonald against Burnley, in the in the semi-final. Martin Duncan. They had a great team. Martin Duncan was on his back. If you look at that he it was either Jeff Nulty or Martin Duncan. I'm actually probably got the names wrong. I think it was one of them had both arms around his neck. Brilliant through ball from Terry Hibbert, and I was there in when the goal went in. Newcastle had three sides of the ground. Out of 50-odd thousand, must have had 40-odd thousand. But then the group went up in the Burnley end, and Burnley had the small stand. And yeah, what a day that was as well. Having that was a fabulous ground at the time. Of course, it went on to be a tragic ground because of Hillsborough, but what happened there. But at the time, what a game that was.
Great stuff. Great, and thanks for sharing your memories. Just moving forward now, obviously we touched a little bit on the Black Lives Matter campaign, and how it's reached across not just football but all the other sports. You mentioned Lewis Hamilton a little bit earlier, who's making some fantastic inroads in Formula One and trying to raise the profile of the campaign there. How would you like to see this progress? Because I do know there's sometimes a feeling that these things they're like fads, it'll come and go. But this one seems to have run and run. The players are taking the knee before each game, not just in football but cricket, and obviously we know the much publicised taking the knee in Formula One as well. How would you like to see this progress over the next few months and into next season?
Well, what's happened so far has been great. I think it's happened from the ground up. The demonstrations, the actions by young people, but now it needs to go into government, and that's where I think the pressure needs to be applied by. And it's great that Lewis Hamilton's saying that education's key, but we need to change the national curriculum. We need to have anti-racism on there so young people can look at history, and not just the history that we're told, but the history of colonialism. Look at what the world is at the moment as well. So I think it's key that we look at education, and that the government do that. But also, we've got a very unequal world. COVID-19 showed us that. If it showed us, the death rate for poorer people, the key workers, has been horrendous. And of course, within that, then black workers as well, 4 times more likely to die. So we need a more equal world. I mean, the people who've done all these jobs, the key workers, the NHS workers, if they have to go back to minimum wage again, if they have to go back to 0-hour contracts and all the horrendous things that we've got in society, then we'll have missed an opportunity, because The one thing this COVID-19 showed us is we can challenge some of these issues. I mean, homelessness was rife at the beginning of COVID-19. You go on the streets, particularly walking through Newcastle in December and that, and people are freezing, sitting there freezing, collecting money outside the shops and that, homeless young people. And yet suddenly, no problem, we've sorted that issue. So there have been issues sorted during this COVID-19 I think we need to look at as a society. Racism's one of those issues, but inequality generally I think is an issue as well.
Yeah, great points. Well made, Jed. Jed, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Anybody wants to get involved, and as Jed said, visit Show Racism the Red Card at theredcard.org. Anything else you want to say, Jed, before we finish?
No, that's it, Steve. Thanks very much for having me on. Yeah, let's hope Newcastle get a takeover and we get a club that our supporters deserve, because you know we've had. It made me laugh when Liverpool was talking about 30 years of hurt, and you look at what they've won in them 30 years. Well, you know, we know why we're the best supporters in the world. It's because we've had nothing. I'm 58-year-old, and I can't remember 69. So you know, it's been a lot of years for Newcastle United fans, and let's hope we get an owner who actually puts this club where it belongs, right at the top. Yeah.
Jed Grebby, Show Racism the Red Card. Thanks very much.
Cheers, Steve.